All right, so up on the screen you see the steps. Like you, I want to do the same thing, so I'm going to start up a new instance of Visual Studio. That's step 1. Step 2, as mentioned, create a new Windows Form application project called Acme Test. Don't put any blank spaces in the name. So File, New, Project. It'll be a Windows Forms application, and I'm calling it Acme Test. I don't really care, if you didn't capitalization. You're not turning this in. All right. All right. It says it already exists. So I already have one called Acme Test. So I'll make mine Acme Test 2. For today, we're not going to worry a lick about this form. That's what we're going to do tomorrow. All right. The only thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to change the form's text property. That's it. So I'm going to come in here, and for the form, I'm going to change. I'll tell you what. I'm going to change the name of the form to Form Acme, and I'm going to change the text for the form to C#. You can see it up here. C#-Acme database test project. That's all we're doing with this form today. Everything else we're doing, it's all new. We haven't done any of the stuff we're about to do. All right, because we haven't done anything with a database before. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to show you something. I don't want you to do this. All right, there's 2 ways that we can start what's called the Server Explorer. I don't want you to do it the first way, but you can go in and type View and choose Server Explorer. And you see how the window changes right here? You're going to see that in just a couple minutes. I don't want you to do it that way. All right. Is it wrong to do it that way? No, but I just don't want you to do it that way. So we did step 1. Change the name to Form Acme and the form's text property. Okay, so we've done both of those. All right. Next, as it says, we're going to create a new database and add it to the project. So that's what we're going to do right now. And what I want to show you is what I consider to be the most straightforward way of doing this. You may or may not agree once you get some expertise in it. But I'd like you to take your mouse and where yours, if you called it Acme Test like I did here, I'd like you to right mouse click on the name of the project. Not on the name of the solution above it, but on the name of the project. Right mouse click, go down to Add, and choose New Item. You've done this before, but we're going to add something we haven't added before. Okay? So right mouse click on the name of the project, choose Add, choose New Item. And underneath here, what we want to add is not shown right here. So what we have to do is we have to go over to the side here, and we have to single click where it says Data, right there. And the stuff that's in here now changes. This has changed a little bit from the way it used to be. You don't have to worry about that because you're not using an older version. So I'm taking for granted that unless somebody says something, I don't get that, you went too fast, that I'm not going too fast, and that you get it. All right? So what we want to do is we want to choose Service-Oriented Database. Just single click on it. Don't double click on it because if you do, it'll create a new database called database1.mdf. We don't want that name. So if you single click on it, make sure it's Service-Based Database. We're going to come down here and we're going to change the name from Database 1 to Acme. And I do want to mention a couple things, all right, just before, because we are going to just hit Add then, but before we do, a couple of the things that are in here. Probably the only things that are in here that you might ever be concerned with, probably, are going to be ADO.NET Entity Data Model, and that's a way for you to have some of the code written for you automatically. like it or not like it, but we've already gone over object-oriented programming. The way that typically C# is going to handle this stuff when you start writing complex database applications is every table becomes a class. That's the way that it works. All right, I'm not saying, hey, that's the way that it works. Do you like it? Because that's the way that it works. All right? The data set, we're not going to worry about these EFs. I don't even know what they are. This one's interesting where it says link to SQL classes. Link is something that was created by Microsoft. You know, leave it to Microsoft. We've had SQL, and we've had SQL for basically about 45 years plus. All right? And I've said this before. Name me something else back in 1970 that was being used with computers that's still being used regularly now. Because I can't think of too many things. But really, over the years, SQL has basically, it's kind of grown up, but it's not really changed very much from when it was first created. All right, but link is kind of Microsoft's spin on SQL. Link stands for line item query, or I'm sorry, it's line integrated query. All right, the L for line, the IN for integrated, the Q for query. And it's a little weird. You'll see it next semester, but I just want to mention it to you. You end up writing SQL, but it almost looks like SQL in reverse. All right, because the last, like if you're doing a select statement, you're used to doing, saying now like select star from employees. All right, but when you write it in link, it's more like from employees select star. You end up changing the order in which you do things. So why would they do something like that? Well, what you can do with link is not only can you use link on databases, you can use it on virtually anything. So you can create an array and all of a sudden start treating it as though it's a database. You can't do that with most other software products. So it's really strong stuff. What we want is the service-based database. So make sure that one is highlighted and make sure you choose Acme, all right, for the name. The XML stuff, we may or may not have talked about this last semester. I don't remember. But XML is an acronym. All right, it stands for Extensible Markup Language. The idea behind XML is you create your own tags, as opposed to having to use the HTML tags. And XSLT is XML Style Sheet Language Transformation. XSLT is kind of the CSS for XML files. All right, that's more than you probably need to ever know, but just so you at least have heard it. So I'm going to take for granted that you all changed it to Acme, and it says acme.mdf, and you're going to click Add. If it works, if you go over and you look in your Solution Explorer window, you should now have these two files. All right, one that says acme.mdf, and I believe MDF there stands for Microsoft Database Format. I've heard different things, all right? And the LDF is a log file. It's log database format. What the LDF file is supposed to do is every time you make changes to the MDF file, the LDF file is supposed to log those changes. Microsoft recommends that you never touch the log file and you don't get rid of the log file, all right? So that's what we've done. Now we've created a brand new database. We haven't done a darn thing with it yet, but we've created a brand new database. So we came through here, we started Visual Studio, we created a new Windows Forms app, we changed the name, we changed the property, so that puts us to step 4. We created the database and added it to the project. We clicked Project, and we did the new item. I should have probably said right-click Project, and select New Item, so let me change that. So right-click on the Visual Studio menu bar and select Add New Item. All right. The Add New Item window appeared. We scroll down, and under Data, we selected Service-Based Database. All right. As it said, we also needed to specify the database name. We did that. The default name was this. We changed it to Acme. We kept the MDF extension, and I just mentioned to you what LDF was. Okay? All right. That isn't anything new then. It says next, click the Add button in the Add New Item window. I don't know what that means. This adds an empty SQL server. We already did that. All right, see, that's why I said I haven't had a chance to really go over this very well. So we looked at the Solution Explorer, and we noticed how it now contained an entry for our acme.mdf database. All right. All right. Now, it says here we should next double-click that MDF file. So, take your mouse, double-click on it. But please look up on the screen when I do it. See how we've got the toolbox? I'm going to double-click. You see how it changed to the Server Explorer? If you need to, you can always bounce back and forth between these two. If you look on the bottom of the screen here. All right, we can always set it up. You can click View. You can split your window so that it contains both of them. You can do whatever the heck you want to do with this. All right, this is the window that we're going to use as we're working on our database. Hopefully, yours looks just about exactly like mine does right now. Now, I do want to mention, because you're going to see this in just a bit, when we start to look at the stuff up here, yours probably up here looks different because yours won't say jpscott@rankin.edu. Yours might say something else. It might be a little bit different up on top. That doesn't matter. All right? Because that's going to be specific to whatever your login and your machine stuff is. All right. So we double-clicked it. The Server Explorer now opened. Okay, and it's like, how are you going to spend 2 hours on this? Just give me time. All right. So it says, let's add our first table. In the Server Explorer, make sure that the MDF entry is expanded. What does that mean? That means that in here, if we want to, we can expand any of these. But right now, they're not going to show much because there's nothing in there yet. But what they meant was if it came out and it looked like this, if yours looked like you see on the screen right here, then click the arrow here so it looks like this. All right? So since nobody's saying anything, I'm taking for granted that you've all done that. All right. So what we want to do is right-click on the Tables tab and choose Add New Table. And that's going to bring up what's called the Table Designer. So I'm going to right-mouse click on here, choose Add New Table. And it's going to change your window in here a lot. And it's going to bring up something, like I said, that's referred to as the Table Designer. Now, yours might come up, boom, right away. Yours might take some time like mine just did. Either way, it's okay. I want to wait until everybody says that's what yours looks like. All right? Now, I used to ask this question, but people would get embarrassed if the answer was no. If you have ever worked with Microsoft Access, this is going to look fairly familiar to you. Microsoft Access is basically a watered-down version of this that comes with Microsoft Office. Microsoft Access is nice because it's virtually totally GUI, all right? And it's a good way for people to start learning about databases. That's the good news about it. The bad news about it is Access only works well if you've got maybe 10 to 25 users. If you were having hundreds of users that was banging on a database, what happens is an Access database will break down over time. All right? I've seen it happen many times because it's designed for either standalone or for projects that don't have many users. So for instance, if we were going to create something in here and we knew that it was only going to be used by the 8 or 9 of us in here, 9 or 10 of us, and that was it, we could use Access. The advantage of using SQL Server is it's a full-fledged relational database management system. All right, and I want to mention too, what we're using is something that's called SQL Express. One of the reasons when you first loaded Visual Studio onto the system, if you remember, I told you to load everything. One of the things that automatically got loaded when you chose everything was SQL Server Express. That's why we didn't have to do a special download in order to be able to do this. Now, SQL Server Express, which is what we're using, is a watered-down version of SQL Server. It doesn't have all of the report capabilities, but it's got everything we're going to ever need. All right. But if you ever need to do that, you can go out and you can always Google how to install SQL Server 2014 or even the new one, 2016, onto your system. All right, it's not a hard thing to do. You have to know whether or not your system is 32-bit or 64-bit because there's different things that you can download, and that's it. But again, for what we're doing, it'll be fine. Now, you'll notice if you look up here that right now we actually have a field in here. The field is called ID. All right? The recommendation from Microsoft is that you don't change that field name. We're not going to, we actually are going to change it in just a minute, but we don't have to change it if we don't want to. All right? Now, if you look on the handouts that I gave you, and everybody should have the handout, it's 2 pages. I understand. Oh, yours doesn't look like on the screen here? What does it look like? Right. Does anybody else have that? It's not showing this? Did you right mouse click on there and choose take it? Oh, okay. Now, double click. Should be. I guess it's bigger enough. What this is, that should be. Right mouse click was the big. Minimize that. It should. You shouldn't have to, but you shouldn't have anything special that you have to do. There, no, go back to where you were. That's because it should be located. That's what you said. Now, I don't want to confuse you, but I do want to mention something, and that is you actually have your choice here when you're filling up. We're going to fill up a table in just up here in just a second. When we start doing this, if you don't like to fill it up here, you can fill it in down here. All right, so you can use either the more GUI version or the textual version. I'm going to recommend for the first table, just use the GUI one that's up here. All right, if you go, well, I don't want to. I can't make you do anything you don't want to do. But I think it's much easier for you to use it that way. Again, you may or may not agree with that. Okay? All right. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to change the name of this. Instead of ID, we're going to change this to department number. This is going to be our departments table. And if you remember, I'm going to put this up here, but I'm going to read. We had like 1 was information technology. 2 was web design. We had 3, which was something, 4, which was something, 5, which was something, and 6, which was networking. So that's what we're going to end up putting in here in just a couple minutes. All right? But what we're doing in here right now is we have to set up the schema. Okay? And you'll notice, if you all take a look up here on the screen, hopefully you all notice this, it automatically makes this first field the primary key. All right? That's what we want. That's a good thing. We changed the name to department number. We do want it to be of type int. We don't want it to have nulls. So everything that's there is good. That's all we want. But we're not done yet. If you remember, the way that we typically set this thing up is we set it up to auto increment. The way you auto increment here is different. All right, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go down to my properties window that's right here. And I'm going to write, if you don't see a properties window on your screen right now, just right mouse click on here and choose properties. And that should show the properties window over here. All right, and with this chosen, I want you to go down to where it says identity specification. It's in it's in alphabetic order, so you should be able to find it. I want you to come down to identity specification and click the plus sign that's on there. All right? Once you click the plus sign, you should see something where it says is identity, and yours probably says false. Double click on the word false to turn it to true. And then notice what it did. It should have added these two things that you see up on the screen right here. It should have added identity increment 1, and it should have put in identity seed, which was 1. So what that says is, by default, make our first department in there number 1, our second one number 2, etc. Does that make sense? We're going to do all 3 tables today. We're going to put in all 3 tables. And when we put in the information for the employees table, we're going to change that identity seed from 1 to 1001. So our first employee is 1001, our next one is 1002, etc. All right? So that's good. That's everything we need. There's just one more thing we want to do in here, and that is we want to add one more field. So go ahead and just take your mouse and click in the second field here. The second field that we want to put in is going to be called department number. I'm sorry, department name, my fault. Department name. Remember, each one of these has got a number and it's got a name. All right? Now our first field was of type int. That's what we typically want. If you look up on the screen here, if I click the down arrow, you'll notice there's a lot of different types that I can use here. But I want to mention something to you. All right? We've talked, again, a little bit about this, but not a lot. Let's assume that this database that we're working with could potentially be used around the world. Everybody with me? All right, we're just going to assume that it could be being used in other languages. Okay? In other words, non-English. Okay? The reason I'm telling you that is what we want to set the department number to is we want to choose nvarchar. I'm going to explain to you exactly what that means in just a minute. But we want nvarchar, and we're going to want that to be of size 25. And we don't want nulls. So when you get done, yours should look like what you see on the screen right here. Don't save, don't do anything yet. So we're creating the schema, whereas previously when we created the schema, we did it in MySQL. Now we're creating the schema, but we're doing it in SQL Server. I think it's worth our time to do this, not because I'm trying to waste your time, but I want you to create an entire database, including the schema and including the records in SQL Server. All right? Now, notice, again, not only is there an nvarchar, and I'm not going to change it, but if I go down to the bottom, there's also a varchar. So what's the difference? If you say nvarchar, which is what we did, that means we want to use the Unicode character set, which means that it can use not only English, which is in the ASCII character set, A through Z, uppercase, lowercase, etc., but it can use other languages. So the difference between using nvarchar and varchar, if we use varchar, it's English only, because it only uses the ASCII, ASCII, the American Standard of Code for Information Interchange character set. We want to use the global worldwide character set, which is Unicode. You go, that sounds familiar. We used Unicode last semester with some of the stuff that we did when we were creating websites. All right? So you should have these things that are in here. Now, if you look up on the screen, please, you'll notice that down below I've got this stuff. When I do this, this is called my TSQL window. T for transact. All right, the language that you use when you do this is called transact SQL. So this is the TSQL window. It's broken up into a bunch of different windows and stuff, but if you look here, this has got the GUI version of our data, and this says, when I do this, this is actually the stuff that is going to end up being run. Does that make sense? It's showing you both the GUI version and the version here. We want to change something down here. We want to change it because right now if we saved it, it's going to call this table. I want it to be called table. So we're going to want to click in here. We are going to use a capital D, but we're going to put in here instead of table. You want to keep the brackets, but we're going to put in there departments. So go ahead and put that in. Don't hit enter when you get done. Don't hit anything. But just change where it says table here. Change this to departments. That's it. All right? And if you spell it wrong, you should be able to go back later, right mouse click on the table name, and choose rename. Sometimes it gets a little funky if you do that. Yesterday when I created the 3 tables, I went through this myself. The departments table, for whatever reason, I made it a lowercase d instead of a capital D, and I tried to do a rename. It wouldn't let me, because it basically said that lowercase d and uppercase D were the same thing. But it wouldn't let me change them, so I had 2 that were in uppercase and 1 that was in lowercase. See what I'm saying? All right. So what is this telling us? We've got 2 field names in here. We've got a department number field, which is an integer. It doesn't allow nulls. It's the primary key, and it's an identity. Again, identity is the way that SQL Server does auto increment. All right. We've got another field that's called dep name. It's an nvarchar, so again, it's going to accept the Unicode character set. It's going to be between 1 and 25 characters, and that can't be null. Does all that make sense? All right. So the way that we actually, there's 2 more things that we have to do, and then we can actually put in our data. All right. If you look up on the screen here, the first thing we're going to have to do is click on that arrow where it says update. So go ahead and do that right now. Click on the arrow up here that says update. And if it looks like this, that's a good thing. Because it's telling you, okay, this is what we've just done. It's letting you know that. If when you try doing that, there were any kind of errors, you'd get the error in them. All right, so if you tried doing something that was illegal, let's say that you manually came in here and where it said int, you left the T off of int, where it just said in instead of int. You'd get an error message right there. It still hasn't been done, though, because what we have to do yet is click the button down here that says Update Database. Right there. Right here. So go ahead and click that button. And once you get done, it doesn't look any different on the screen, but now you've created the schema for your first table. All right, again, I know it doesn't look like much. It's a start. All right. So, on the last page that I gave you, this last page that looks like this, sorry, the text is a little smaller. All right. What we're going to do is now, okay, if I close this, you don't have to close yours, but if I close this, what should have happened, and it's not, I'm not sure why. There we go. All right, go ahead and close yours up here where you've got that open. Close it, and then see the button that's right here? Look on the screen, please. This button up here. Go ahead and click that. That'll refresh it, and now you should see the department's table underneath there. If you said, I did everything and it's not there, then raise your hand. Okay, because I went and talked to Charles about this, and I said, Charles, I think that sometimes people aren't getting this and they're not letting me know. And he said, not to sound callous, then it's their problem. Because if you ask them and they don't let you know, then there's a problem. Oh, that's fine. Put that up there. The blue thing. Way in the corner. Put back in here. Put back. break. Maybe you can just look on the column and I'll look during the break and I'll have to Google it here and see if we can. Anybody else? All right, what we want to do then is we want to right mouse click on the name of the table that you see right here, right mouse click, and choose Show Table Data. And if it looks like this on the screen, you did it right. So we right mouse clicked on the name of the table and we chose Show Table Data. All right. Now we're going to fill this up. Please look up on the screen, or look up here. Using this, do not put the numbers in. We set that up for us automatically. So in other words, click right here for the department name for the first one. Type in Information Technology. And if you say, well, it's too wide, you can always widen this out if you want to. All right. You can widen that out if you want to or need to or whatever. All right, not sure why it's not allowing me to, but I think as soon as we move to the next record, there we go. So information technology, the second one is web design. Notice how it's putting the numbers in there and I don't have to. The third one is payroll. The fourth one is shipping. The fifth one is accounting. And finally, the sixth one is networking. All right. If you have all of those, and if it looks like this, the first thing I do would be to check it and make sure you spelled everything correctly. All right. And that you've got it capitalized the way that we've got it capitalized in here. All right. If you're cool with all of that, then what you should be able to do is, I think if we close it, if it hasn't, it's supposed to be writing it as we move off the record form. It writes it, it writes it, it writes it. It's auto commit. So if we go ahead and we close this, okay, it's in there. You go, I don't believe you. Well, we can right mouse click on here again, and now if you choose Show Table Data, it should be there. Go ahead and do that and verify that indeed you have that information in there. And if you do, you have now created your first SQL Server schema, and you have created and put in the records for the first one. All right. And again, it might not sound like much, but you know, Amin this summer when he's going and doing his internship, they may ask you to go ahead and create an SQL Server database. You know how to do it now. All right. And I'm not saying there's not more to it. Of course there's more to it than that. But at least you know pretty much what you have to do in order to be able to do it. So I'm going to go back to this. So, all right. We added our first table. We right-clicked. We chose Add New Table. We brought up the Table Designer. All right, I called it the Table SQL window. It doesn't matter. The Designer was where we specified the names and the data types of our columns. All right. You saw all this stuff. We had the key icon for the primary key. The name by default was ID. We changed the name from ID. All right. So we'll change it to just the department number for the first table. We're going to actually leave it as ID for the other two tables that we're going to do shortly. All right. Now, you might think, well, why are you doing that? Why aren't you making an ID? We could have left it ID. We could have done that. All right? But hopefully you'll see why we're doing it like that in just a couple minutes, if you don't right now. All right, we said that the column's data type was an int. The allows null checkbox is not checked. Remember, next we're going to do the city, state, zip table. That's only going to have like 3 fields in it. So we'll do that very quickly. Boom, boom, boom. Then we'll do the employees. The employees table, if you remember, has a middle initial field in it, which can have nulls. So that one will be checked for the middle initial. That's the only one here that's checked. All right? All right. So instead of keep the name ID for the first one, we wanted to change the name oops, name from ID to department number. All right, we did that. Press the tab key. All right, we made the identity column. This explains how to do that. This explains what all that stuff is about. Again, I'm taking for granted that since we did that once, when we do it for the next two tables, as far as changing that identity column, etc., you can all do that. It's not any different. We're going to do it the same way. We're going to do this second table, and then we're going to take a break. All right, then we come back, we'll take a look at the employees table. That one's going to be a little bit different because we're going to add a little bit more to it. We'll add that data also to the employees table, and that'll pretty much be it as far as what we're going to do today. Tomorrow we'll actually sync up those tables with the database. All right? All right. Yeah, the is identity I talked about. So you saw that already. Okay. As it says, we completed the departments table as a class. I told you the difference between the N in nvarchar and the V in varchar, so we've done all that. All right? So we are finished designing the table, but we need to change the table's name. When you create a new table, it's given a default name such as table. All right? And we change that in here from table to, so change from so we change it from this, where it said table, to this, where it said departments. Okay? All right. All right. Although we changed the table's name in the TSQL window, it does not take effect until you update the database. So you saw how to do that. We had to click that one arrow thing that was up near the upper left-hand corner that said update, and that brought up that dialog box that said actions and all that other stuff, and it had 3 buttons in the bottom. Then we had to click the button in the middle that said update database. You just did that. Nothing new there. All right, so that's what we saw. The table should now be open and ready for input. It says enter the data as shown in your handout. Keep the following points in mind. First, do not enter values for the ID column. I already mentioned that to you. It's automatically generated. Number 2, you must enter values for the department name column. All right? You may or may not have noticed, you'll see it much more. What I'm about to tell you, you'll see this much more when we do the employees table. Okay? When we go and you start putting in information, you're going to see a bunch of red exclamation points. It almost looks like you've got an error. You don't. What it's telling you is you've got information in your database which has not yet been written out to the database. All right, so you're going to see that in just a couple minutes. All right, once you've entered all the data, click File and click Save All. Don't have to worry about that. We've already done that. The rows are saved to the database. Close the table. No, we don't have to do this. So we're going to quickly come in here and add the city, state, zip table, and then after the break, we're going to add the employees table. Tomorrow, as it says, we'll connect our Acme MDF database to the applications form, and we'll add a control to it that allows us to interact with the database. All right? How much of that are we going to do? I'm going to write it this afternoon, so I'll be able to tell you that tomorrow. All right? I think now everything that's in here is correct. So what I'll do is I'll save this, and during the break, I'll print off 9 copies. You can each have your own copy. I don't know what the problem you're having there, Dominic, so what we're going to do is I'm going to take what I've got, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put that on your machine and see if we can get it to work that way. All right? Okay, so before we take a break, let's go in and do this. If you all look up on your screen here, hopefully you're right here. All right? You may or may not have closed this, but we can close it. So I want you to be right here. All right? So we're going to right mouse click on tables again, right mouse click on tables, and choose add new table. All right, so right mouse click on table and choose add new table. All right, on this handout I gave you, if you look at the one that's right here, I did them in color on purpose. Well, that isn't true. I printed out the first one and it wasn't colored. I said, the hell with it. They're all in color now. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to put in those 4 fields for city, state, zip. So we're going to right mouse click on here again. Again, choose new table. We just did that. We've got this. So the first field we're going to leave as an int. And we're going to leave the name ID. We're not going to allow nulls. But for that first field, we're going to come down here like we did before and come down to identity specification. Click the plus signs. Change the is identity from false to true. Keep the identity increment at 1 and keep the seed at 1. If you've done both those, that's all you have to do for that field. So let's go to the second field here. This will be called CSZ, which stands for city, state, zip. City. That's going to be an nvarchar. And it's going to be an nvarchar of size 20. And we're not going to allow nulls. All right, our third field will be CSZ state. That will be an nchar because it's fixed length. And it's of size 2. Remember, it's got the state abbreviation in it. That will not be allowed to have nulls. And the last field will be CSZ zip. And that will be another nvarchar. And that will be of size 10. Again, that will allow us to either put in the zip code as, for instance, what we have here, 63385, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters, or 63385 dash number, which would be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 characters. That's why we're making it of size 10. We also do not want to allow nulls in that one. So we're going to undo the check. All right? And the last thing we want to do is we want to come down here and we want to change this again from table to city, state, zip. All right? Now, if you look up on the screen, if you're comfortable with everything you just put in here, so if basically yours parrots mine, all right, then again, click the update that you see right here. You don't have to click the arrow. You can click the word update too. And if you get this, it's showing you what it's about to do. And if you got that, click update database. Now you have your second table schema in here. All right, we can now close this. Again, up on your screen here, if you look up on the screen, right here, where you've got that arrow, we want to refresh again, and now we've got our second table, our city, state, zip. If we right mouse click on our city, state, zip table and choose show table data, now we can add in the 6 different city, state, zips, and I've got them for you right here. Now, do you see the exclamation points? It's telling me that I've been putting information out there. That information has not yet been written to the database. So 63385. Please look up on the screen and notice as soon as I hit tab, how it goes away. It was now written to the database. Auto commit is set on there, which means automatically write it when I move off the record. Yes.
So like periods and apostrophes and stuff is all handled.
It should all be handled internally by the system, as far as I know.
Okay.
If I'm wrong, we're going to all find out together. All right? So this is what all of your data should look like once you're finished. If you put all that stuff in and you're happy with it, again, once you're done, you should be able to close. Then if you right mouse click on there one more time and type in show table data, you should see your data in here. You know, I've said this before, I'm not trying to be funny or insulting or anything. This isn't rocket science. And ideally, everything that we've just done makes sense to you. All right? So it's 8:57. Let's come back. Let's make it 9:10. And we'll finish up. We'll do the stuff for the employees table at that time. All right? And what I'll do, Dominic, is I'll put the employee stuff in and then I'll copy the whole thing to you so you'll have everything. Is there anyone else that you've had trouble getting this stuff to work? All right. I think, like I said, with yours, it was just a docking problem. I don't think you weren't doing anything wrong. I don't think Dominic's doing anything wrong. I think somehow there's something goofed up with his software.